Welcome, everyone. Hopefully you're all here for incident handling process. My name is Brian Ventura, and I'm a SANS instructor. I also work in the public sector. I work at the City of Portland as an information security architect. That's my day job. So I have similar background as some of you and deal with some of the same issues. So hopefully this will be useful for you. I've got my contact information there and also the link to my courses. I teach a number of courses for SANS and they're posted on that link at the bottom. What I'm going to be talking about today is primarily based on the SANS Security 504 class, and that's the incident handling class and hacker tools. It goes into a lot more depth than this. This material is basically the first day of material. I'm going to give it to you in an hour, and it takes a whole day for the course. So there's a lot more to this than what I'm going to cover. And I believe that after this, you get access to these slides. The slides have lots of details in the comments, so I highly recommend that you read through those after you get this, maybe in a week or so when they send it out. But lots of really good information, and so let's get started on this. So sometimes with incident response, it feels like we're falling. If we don't have a plan, we have nothing to grasp onto. It's a scary thing, and we don't want it to be that way. So instead of having this feeling every time someone says, by the way, I think that we have malware, or we have a phishing event and they've ransomwared our whole environment, those kinds of things, instead of feeling that fear and uncertainty, if we have a plan, then we can pull that out, and that can be our safety net to help us walk through, remember all the steps, and do what's supposed to get done. So real quick, incident handling for us is basically having a plan. So a plan to deal with adverse conditions. Something bad happens on our network. We have a reference manual that will tell us, go talk to these people, bring in those teams, look at these kinds of evidence or logs, and we'll get through this. There's a lot more to it, and that's what we're going to start digging into. Anybody have a need for me to explain why you should have incident response? With how things are going today and the big news items, I think it's pretty obvious. But some key points that we have up here, most of us have some form of compliance that we have to deal with. Most of those compliance regimes say you need to report when you lose data or when an adverse event happens. The other thing is that incident response by itself is a form of due care, and that's actually a legal term, the idea that if you were ever sued for losing information or something like that, one of the questions would be, what would a prudent person do in your situation? And that's due care. So a normal person that knows a little bit about security, what would they do when you're given whatever that bad thing is? Think about the big ones, Equifax. You have a struts vulnerability, someone broke in through that. When they go to court, someone's going to say, what would a prudent person do if they were working at Equifax, right? And we want to make sure that in our plan, we have a reasonable amount of incident response so that we can show that we've done the best practice kind of thing that we need to do. And then we probably have our own policies that we need to meet. Some definitions, we want to understand the difference between an event and an incident. An event is anything that's observable. So someone logs into a computer reboots. Those are events. Are they malicious? We don't know yet. Normally when a user logs in, that's probably not malicious. Normally when someone reboots their computer, not malicious. But these are things that we track. We probably have logs with this kind of information, right, in our organizations. That's what an event is. On the other side, we have an incident. That's where we take that same event and we realize that it's adverse. It's bad for our environment. Maybe this is an attacker trying to get into our system, logging in instead of Brian Ventura logging into the system. Working at the City of Portland, we've had a recent rash of phishing. I know no one else is having that problem. We're the only ones. But seriously, for us, we had an incident where 3 weeks earlier, someone was phished and we didn't catch it. Then that person sent out invoices to everybody in the room or in our organization, a large percentage. The unfortunate thing is this person does that for the city. So they sent out invoices. Many people were like, well, I don't know why I'm getting an invoice right now. I don't need one, but I guess it's for me. And they opened it. So it hit us really hard. The fun part about it is that person, that account, people would respond to him saying, I don't think I'm working with you on an invoice. Why'd you send me this? And that person would respond, no, that's for you. That is definitely your invoice. Go ahead and click on it. It's good. It was the attacker logged into our system. So logging in, a single login event is an event, but then in this case, this was an adverse event because that wasn't my real user logging in. So there's a kind of an example of an incident. A couple other examples, system crashes, boot logs, network spikes. Those are just events. They happened on our network. They may be something that we want to correct, like the network spikes. Maybe we want to correct something, but it's not a problem. It's not a security problem. Then the incident is that unauthorized use of another's credentials. Well, that's what happened to us during that phishing. Sniffing wireless traffic. They're trying to see if there's a way to break into our wireless. If we can see them doing that, that would be an incident. And then, of course, malware is going to be an incident. All right, we've gone over enough material that I think it's time to test you. You ready? Didn't know that I was doing that, did you? All right, seriously, this is an example of some log output, and don't worry about getting this right or wrong, but let's look at this. The top piece of information is some snort output. Anybody use snort? Or the snort is an intrusion detection system. So it has noticed a malicious packet coming across our network. It's identified it as a Microsoft IIS web server attack looking for VTI_INF, which is an informational page that's standard in Microsoft systems. So that's what we see on our snort output. It's an event. We think it's malicious, so we're going to investigate for a little bit deeper. So then we look at the lower information and we look at our web server logs to see what the web server responded to. The web server says, hey, I'm Apache, it happens to be in the log, and I have a file does not exist message for you when someone went to the site and tried to do the Microsoft IIS exploit or attack. That the response was that the Apache server said the file was not found. So from this much information, we can actually decide whether it's an incident or event. So what do we think? What's that? Event? Anyone else? No one else. Okay, so why event?
Because nothing malicious happened.
Okay. Yeah. So that's correct. It's an event because the attack hit the wrong kind of server. It was looking for a Microsoft server. It found an Apache server, not compatible, doesn't have the same vulnerability. So this isn't an incident that we have to dig into. So let me change the scenario. I didn't mention this, but you see the IP addresses up there. 63209 is something on the internet, not my network. 10 dot whatever, that's my network. So you can see that it's coming from the outside into my network. This is probably a public-facing website, so it's okay that they're talking to it, but that's what's going on there. Now let's change it and say it's instead of 63209, now it's my own IP space. So it's 10.0. something doing the attack, doing this malicious connection. Does that make it an event or an incident? Does that switch it for us? Well, for me, I say that's an incident because my internal machine should not be attacking other machines. Even though they're not successful, it shifts it. The internet, I can't control all those people. I can't stop them from trying to attack me, but I can block them with my firewalls and intrusion detection systems. I've got solutions to help protect myself. But internally, I have acceptable use policies and things like that that says, all of you that are in my organization, you're not allowed to hack. Why are you hacking? So once that's an internal IP address that's initiating it, I'm going to call it an incident. So that's kind of how we can see this. So that's kind of the background in this. Now that we understand what an incident is, how are we going to deal with it? And SANS has this 6-step process that we're going to go through. This aligns with most of the best practices out there. So if you use NIST or use something else, they're going to have similar phases that you would go through in your incident response. They may change the names a little bit, and that's unfortunate that we have different names. So if you already think about these kinds of phases and you use a different name, just substitute the name. My name is not better than your name. I'm just, these are what we're calling them here. And I'm going to go into detail about all of these, but the concept is we're sitting in preparation and identification right now. We're doing preparation right now because we're learning about how to build this process. So we're doing our preparation, we're figuring out what we need to do, and we're also sitting in identification mode probably right now because back at the office, you may have an intrusion detection system. You may have a firewall that's logging all the connections. You're looking for an attack right now in your organization. Not you specifically, but the tools that you have and the staff that are still back at the office doing that grind work that we get out of for today. All right. So the identification is happening. But then once we identify something, we're going to try to contain it, we're going to try to eradicate it, we're going to try to recover, and then, very important, we want to do that as lessons learned. So let's dig into those. So in preparation, again, the goal here is to be prepared, to know what we're going to do to respond to an incident. And there's some components that we need to think about. So one of the big components is people. And there's two pieces to this people that we want to think about. There's our end users. All of our end users are some of the first people to notice an attack. And they may be part of our response to attacks. And so we want to give them education. And of course, I'm SANS, so I'm going to mention securing the human, right? That's the training that SANS provides to end users. You can buy modules, little videos, things like that. There's other vendors. So if you use a different vendor, that's great, but you have end user awareness or end user education where you're telling them how to respond to phishing emails and things like that. Turns out that most of the attacks today are these phishing type attacks where we're asking our users to please participate in the attack and allow people into the organization. And the reason for that is that server-side attack we've got really good controls over. We've got firewalls, we've got intrusion prevention systems, all kinds of things stopping those. And so they've switched to that, send a message inside and hope that person clicks on something. Hope they run my malware, hope they give me the credentials so I can log in. So we definitely want to train those users. The other people that are important is our incident response team. So who is on an incident response team? All right, a couple hands are out there. When you think about your incident response team, it may be cybersecurity professionals like us that are doing that. It also, on my team, I've got my legal department because they've got to tell us what we need to do to meet legal compliance and where we're going to run afoul if we don't do it. I also have my city communications expert. This person talks to the public all the time. They tell people about the latest thing that happened with maybe what we're doing with our roads or what we're doing with housing or whatever. They also talk about cybersecurity. They are the expert at talking to people. They know nothing about cybersecurity, but they know how to talk to the public. I'm not supposed to be the person talking to the public. Now, I'm kind of doing it here, but that's because of a different role. I would be afraid to talk to the news because I love giving information away. I'm like, oh yeah, it was like this, and they came in that way, and the phishing email, and my communications person's like, no, stop it. So I'm not going to talk to the public about these kinds of incidents. I'm going to have that communications person. So we need to think about the people that are in our team that's responding to these things. And make sure that they're aware of this. So we tell them, hey, you're part of our team, and then they can ask the questions of, well, what do I need to know so that I can do my communications, so I can do my legal? The other thing we need are these policies, and one of the big ones is a warning banner. Now, everybody, when you log into your computer, if it's Windows, you do a Control-Alt-Delete, and you get that pop-up, and it's a big, long paragraph, right? And you have to press OK. Anybody read that? No one reads that. Well, they're supposed to, right? And that is kind of a just-in-time policy to let people know that we are going to do things on their computer. We own the data. We're going to monitor you. All these different statements that are in here are useful to have in that policy and that banner that you give to people because they're clicking OK, yes, I read this, which means that they know that we are monitoring their systems. We're looking through their email if you do that. They're not authorized to do bad things in your network. They're not allowed to be that internal hacker. My team actually does have a letter from the CTO, our lead of the technology department, and that says that Brian is authorized to do hacking inside the network because that's part of my role, but not everybody has that letter. And even though I have that letter, I can't do anything I want. I need to document what I'm about to do, tell people, go through change control actually sometimes for some of the attacks that I'll do. I have to go through change control so they know it's coming. But this acceptable use banner is definitely a part of my incident response. It gives me the ability to do some things. So then we're going to have our what we're going to do during the incident. So we need to make sure that these are the team members and they have the resources that they need. These are the tools that we're going to use and they're in the right hands and things like that. So we need to have a really good understanding of the different parts of an incident and document all of these things. A big thing that I wanted to call out is this concept of going back to paper and pen. In an incident, it's highly recommended that we take notes on paper. And there's a couple different reasons for this. I know we're in this electronic age and we want to do the computer thing and it's a great idea. It makes us much faster. We actually want to slow down in an incident. We do not want to overlook things. We want to look in every crevice and cranny and corner to make sure that we've identified where the attackers are and what we need to do to get them out of there. And slowing down and writing on paper can help with that. We don't make rash decisions. It's also very useful that the paper copy isn't online, and that therefore our attackers can't see what we've already figured out and what our plan is. I've actually heard a story of an organization that had been attacked. They're currently under attack. The attackers are in the systems. They've identified what they think to be the entire scope. They say these 50 servers need to be rebuilt, these 30 workstations need to be, whatever the plan is, they've identified it. They're sitting in their war room, the door is closed and locked, they're ready to do their incident. They're talking about, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. They make their plan, they walk out of the room, and they find all of their systems light up. The attackers have shifted to other computers. Why'd that happen?
Because you disclosed which ones we're dealing with.
Yeah, so somehow the attackers found out something. How they found it out? They owned the voice over IP system and they turned the microphone on in the conference room phone in the war room conference room, which you want a phone in there. That's how they did it. So kind of scary. They didn't know that they were in the voice over IP system, and therefore their plan was out the door. Then they had to go meet at Starbucks, to do their war room because at least the attackers aren't over at Starbucks. But those are serious things that could happen. With small attacks, that might not be the case, but how do we know whether it's small or big until we've done that investigation? The last thing is that bringing paper into courtrooms, judges and juries understand that. They can feel it and touch it, and they understand physical evidence much better than electronic evidence, so it's useful to have it in paper. Okay. So what about the identification phase? This is where we're running our tools, we're looking for things, we're looking through logs. There's lots of different places we can be looking at things. Our firewalls on our network perimeter, our host-based firewalls or host-based logging, system-level logs, our application-level logs, all are different places where we could find things. And you may have a number of devices. We have passive devices that capture all network traffic and do analytics on it. And we have logs going to a central storage system. SIM is the common term for it, but it's an event management system that sends out alerts when certain things happen. All of those things is what we're talking about in our identification phase. And this is an example of network detection. We're looking at the network packets, and we notice a bunch of what's called a SYN packet. So all these S's up and down. That's the first packet of a communication in a TCP communication. And it's weird to see the first packet without more packets going back and forth. So the fact that we see only a single packet and the port keeps changing, 21 is Telnet, 5900 is VNC, et cetera. We see that they're changing the port each time they connect to us, but it's coming from the same place each time. Then we're thinking that this is probably scanning, right? So someone is scanning our network. If this was an internal machine scanning, that's a big deal, because who should be scanning besides the security team with our scanning tools? We don't want general user scanning. But if it's an external IP address, then that's them hitting our firewall on the outside. So there's one example. You may have seen things like this where the Windows firewall says, I'm not going to allow something to happen. This is another area where we can get intelligence and do our identification. Our malware solutions would give us different detections for malware, or this one actually is a potentially unwanted application. So it's not officially malware, but it's a fishy, weird software that the system is talking about. Then we have application logs. This one here is talking about all these super users logged in and did things, and we're looking at the application layer. This is the biggest challenge for most organizations, because the IT teams manage usually the operating system level and the network, but they don't manage the applications necessarily. So this can be challenging in different organizations. And think about cloud services. Do you get logs from that? That phishing event that I was talking about, we're Office 365. That's where that was happening. And we had to get into the Office 365 logs. Do you have access to that? Maybe you don't currently have access to that kind of data, and having that access is very important. Also, our end users are ultimately sensors for us, and that's why we do some of that awareness sessions with them, is because they can report. That is how we're catching our phishing right now. The good news is we're averaging approximately 5 to 9 phishing events per day at the City of Portland. So this is a big deal for us right now. We have a proof of concept of a solution to resolve that for us, but we're getting inundated by phishing, and our end users are finding it for us. We have a lot of tools that help us contain it really quickly, but we don't have the tools to find those emails today. We have a spam filter. This isn't spam. Phishing is different than spam. Our spam filter doesn't catch enough of it. And the fact that we're getting 5 to 9 different campaigns per day shows how poorly our spam filter is doing. So we're bringing in a phishing solution. Our help desk is dying. They're hating us because they're getting all these calls for this, and that's why we're trying to help them with some kind of solution. SANS has a ton of resources. How many people know what SANS is? Been to SANS training? A few of you? Okay. SANS has a ton of information for free, and we have our courses, of course. And the courses cost money. Highly encourage you to go to them, of course. But we also have free resources. So that link at the bottom of the screen is where you can find these little cheat sheets to help you go through this. But if you search for cheat sheet and SANS, you'll find cheat sheets for all kinds of courses that we provide. And there could be a cheat sheet for instance, the TCP/IP stack. Not really incident response, but maybe that's what you need. And then these ones that are specific to incident response. So I highly recommend you look for those, because there are a lot of resources that we have. There's also all of our reading room papers, all the white papers that people write, gold papers that people write. Anybody who gets a certification can make it a gold certification by writing a paper about that certification, and that gets published back to the community. So SANS holds that information for you, but it's out for everybody. So you write your paper, and then anybody can read that, and they can get the information that you have done in your organization. So it's a great resource. Highly recommend you look through some of that stuff. Okay, we identified an incident. Sometimes it feels really bad to actually call it an incident. Oh boy, what's going to happen? We're going to get in trouble. We're going to have to pay fines. It's horrible. That's not really true. So declaring an incident is very important because that kicks off the investigation and the determination of how bad it is. Just because you say it's an incident doesn't mean that you're going to be in the news like Equifax or like Target or whatever the big companies are that are getting hit. Declaring an incident might just start the team working so that you can identify these things and clean it up before that breach happens. So I highly recommend people think about it and have a very quick response into the incident when it makes sense. So you do a little bit of investigation, but then you determine it's an incident so that you can get the bigger team together. If you ever learn later that it's not a big incident, you can shut down the incident and just say, we resolved this. We learned that Brian actually was in Nigeria logging into his system, and he did send those emails. Okay, that's fine, and we can close the incident as resolved. It doesn't have to be a big event. So that's a big one for us. Once you've identified and declared an incident, you're going to start doing your investigations, getting your information, getting all the pieces together, and you're going to want to move into the containment. And containment is a short-term solution for making sure that the attackers don't finish their mission, maybe stealing your data or getting their ransomware to run on all your systems. You're trying to contain it. You're not getting them out of your network. You may not even want to alert the attacker that you're onto them. So you may duplicate your network and put them in a test network where all the devices that they are currently resident on are in that network, but your sensitive information is not on that network, so that the attackers are still doing their thing. They're trying to dig in deeper, but they are walled off and can't do the bad thing. One of the obvious ways to do this is that you may tell desktop or somebody, if it's a workstation, to go out and pull the network plug so that the machine is no longer on the network. That does alert the attacker, if they're actively working with that machine, that the machine went away. They don't know why it went away, but they're going to guess that you're onto them. But it stops that machine from communicating back out, sending data out, whatever that machine might have been doing. The reason why I say unplug it from the network and not power it off is that powering it off removes some of the volatile information from memory, specifically memory images. So we want to take our forensics images in this phase, and unplugging from the network allows us to get that memory forensics, but still blocks the attacker from doing more damage. So that's the kind of things that we're talking about here. There are a few sub-phases or things to think about while in the containment phase. There's short-term containment, which is kind of what I was talking about with pulling the plug. There's system backup, which is that getting the forensics images, and I'll talk a little bit more about getting forensics images in a minute. And then there's the possibility of long-term containment. In an incident, this is hard for me to conceptualize as a technology person, but now that I've been doing incident response for a while, I understand it better. What do you do when you find out that malware is actively running on a machine and that the attackers are communicating with it and it's attacking other parts of your network? The default might be, quick, let's run in there and unplug the machine, turn it off, whatever, contain it. And that's okay as a response, but we're missing a key person or team in the decision-making process I haven't talked about yet, and that's the business owner. The business owner owns the data, owns the process, and they're ultimately responsible for the data and whatever damage that might occur within this incident. And therefore, they get a lot of say on what we do with the incident. And they may say, leave the system running. Don't play with the attacker, let them attack. And I don't like that, right? I'm a technology person, I don't like that. But there's legitimate business reasons. For instance, you're a hospital. There's loss of life possibilities if you turn off those machines. We run a 911 center. Turning off 911, not acceptable. Most people think that they should be able to call that anytime, right? I mean, I've heard that that's what happens. But seriously, those systems are mission critical. We can't shut them down. So we negotiate with those business owners and say, well, maybe we can split your network and take the infected systems offline, giving you a few systems that you can continue to do that 911 processing or whatever you're doing. I don't know, but we have to talk to that business unit owner to find out what we're going to do with that. And that's where we might fall into this long-term containment. If the business owner says it's mission critical, we have to keep these systems running, we'll design a long-term containment to say, okay, we're going to duplicate networks and we're going to build out an infrastructure just for the attackers so that we don't have problems. So things to think about. There's a lot more to this, but that gives you a flavor for containment. I talked about the teams. There are some incident forms in the middle there. SANS does have some generic forms. They're simple, but they give you an idea of the initial information you need to capture. For the city of Portland, we've written our own incident response forms. They're a little bit longer than the ones that SANS has, but gives us a place to put in all the pertinent information. Who owns this asset, who's affected, who's on our team, and what the timeline of events are. We're keeping that information in our incident response form. We're still doing our notes in a notebook. Another key component to your incident response team is a communicator. So upper management is going to want to know what to do. What's going on? Where should they make a decision? How bad is it? They're going to continually ask you. The person doing the incident response, the hands on the keyboard, the person on the ground, they don't have the time to keep breaking out and talk to the management because they're trying to contain, they're trying to eradicate, they're trying to do all these phases. So you want to have a clear way to get information back up. And for the city of Portland, we're set up for that because my team is a GRC team. We do governance, risk, and compliance. We don't do operations for the most part. We run our vulnerability management system, but that's about it. And so we have the ability in an incident to be an incident commander, which means that we're telling people, go get some forensics images. Network team, what have you found? Whatever, keeping the project running or keeping the incident response running. And we also have that job of being the communicator. So management will come to me and say, where are we with this? And I'll say, this is where we are so far. I have a check-in with the technical team in an hour and I will get more information. They're feeding me information as they go. And then they can send me information in a really unformatted way. They can just say, found something or did this. And then I can translate it into something that management wants to hear so that they can make a really good decision. And so I'm that middle person going back and forth between all those different groups. I definitely bring my legal team in immediately, the city attorneys, to be able to, so that they understand what their part is. So that's a very important piece. As we're looking at the system, at the incident, trying to figure out what's going on, I hinted at this in the beginning, we want to keep a low profile. We want to make sure that those attackers don't realize we're onto them. So we don't want to jump on the machine that they're on and start running these commands that make noise on the network. They may be monitoring for this, waiting for this so that they know now we need to pivot somewhere else. So we want to use some of our passive tools, look at our logs. For the city of Portland, we have something that captures a lot of our packets on our network. So we go to the network capture solution and we look at it and say, oh, I see that the attack came in at this time and then that machine talked to 20 other servers. We had a lot of ransomware events a couple of years ago. And this packet capture solution was awesome for us because we would identify that Brian's computer has ransomware, but we don't know what Brian's computer connected to after that. So the network team would find all the packets that came from my computer and they would say, oh, I see that Brian went to file server 1 and file server 2. Well, those two file servers might have encrypted files that we have to clean up. So we'd give the server team that information. They would go look on those servers, see if they find any encrypted files. So it was very useful for us. If you don't have a full packet capture solution, maybe you can capture some net flow information. That's the same kind of things without the full packets. It gives you the flow of Brian's computer talked to file server 1. You just don't see the stream of data that I sent, which is enough information usually to be able to work on the incident. Okay, I'm going to have to move a little faster because I'm a little behind here. Short term, I've talked about this, some of the examples, disconnecting the network cable, pulling the power if we have to, maybe using the network switches to turn off ports. If we have network management tools to turn off the ports, it's a lot faster than sending a desktop person out there to actually sit at the keyboard and pull the plug. Applying filters, changing DNS names, things like that that might be able to fix our solutions. One of the things we've done at the city is we've blocked URLs for those phishing emails. As soon as we find out what the URL is, we put in a block so that no one can go to the command and control channel after we figured it out. I talked about meeting with our business unit and talking to the business owner. We definitely want to talk to them about it. And if there's a disagreement, they win. It's their data. And that one's hard for me to swallow and maybe hard for you to swallow, but that is true because they own the data. Our job is to inform them. So we tell them, here are the risks, here are the dangers, you may become Equifax. You know, we can use those kinds of examples. We can tell them how big the problem is. It's bigger than a bread basket, so therefore we should do something about this. And then if they say, nope, still it's more important to save lives, then we say, okay, and then we work with them to build a plan, maybe for that longer term containment. Think about your external agencies that you need to work with. Thinking about denial of service, if you've heard of distributed denial of service, I think there was one a couple weeks ago that was exciting. It used, what's it called, Memcache was the new attack, and most distributed denial of services are in the megabyte range or the gigabyte range. Yeah, this one's in the terabyte range per second of data that it's sending to these. There's no way we can fix that on our end, so we need to talk to our ISP and say, can you block this before it gets to us? Can we go upstream further and block it further away from us for that kind of an attack? So talk to your ISP, and in our plan, we should have that contact information in our plan. For me, I also have the FBI contact, and I have regular conversations with them because I want them as a resource on my incident response team if I ever need them. They're not in most of my incident response projects, but I do have them in my list. For you, you should have those same ones. We have an external company that will do our heavy-duty incident response. If we ever have to do that, I have that contact. We're part of the MS ISAC, a multi-state ISAC. The MS ISAC information is in there. They do forensics for us. So we have those things in our plan so that when we need them, we can call them. And something to think about is you want this plan in paper on a shelf as well as electronically, because if they've shut down your network, wasn't there a city in Ohio or something like that recently in the last 3 months that they shut down their whole network? I sent that to my boss because I've told him that we might be next. But they shut down the whole city network because they had ransomwared and encrypted enough of it. So we want to have a paper copy of this so that we can get it offline. I have a USB with me now that has our incident response plan and all of our information, because if it's a catastrophic failure in Portland, I'm the only one left that can do incident response. And I'm in an area where I can get to the cloud and I can contact these people and do this incident. I talked about for our forensics. We want to dig in a little bit deeper. We use FTK Imager as a free software just for the imaging to grab memory forensics. And we also have a solution with a write blocker so that we can grab the disk information and guarantee that we didn't alter it while we were copying it. These are all important. When taking forensics images, you always want to do the most volatile data to the least volatile data, so you need to think about that. This is what write blockers would look like. They physically stop the write channel so that it's impossible to write data to the infected hard drive while you're copying it. So it's a useful tool. And then we want to think about whether we can continue operations, et cetera, and make recommendations for those long term. And I talked a little bit about that. Okay. Some examples of long-term actions. We may patch systems. Specifically patch systems that weren't affected by this, but patch systems that are inside of this so that we can limit the spread of this attack. We can put in intrusion prevention solutions, change passwords, things like that. We want to continue to talk to people, find out. In my phishing example, where someone's account was hacked, when we found out about that, that person is not in trouble because someone attacked them. They're the victim here. We don't want to do victim blaming, especially while we're running our incident. But even afterwards, I argue that we don't want to do victim blaming because this is hard. Just 2 weeks ago, I clicked on a phishing email. I was talking to the person that's sitting in front of me. My screen's here. I looked down at an email, thought it was from my boss, clicked on it, opened the thing, looked at the person. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I just clicked on a phishing email. So I had to report myself, and I had to do, I did full forensics on my machine because that's what I do. But I had to report myself, report the phishing, and actually do mini incident response. I quickly figured out that it just downloaded a file that I didn't run, so I didn't get infected. But I did full forensics just to make sure that it wasn't a problem. But we don't want to blame people is the big thing that I wanted to get across. We then move, once we've contained it, once we understand how big this problem is, we really want to understand all the systems that are affected before we go into eradication. Many people want you to go into eradication as soon as possible, and I caution you to make sure you understand all the machines that are affected. Otherwise, you're going to do what's called whack-a-mole, if you've heard that, the game where you knock them down and you have to keep hitting around. That's what you'll do with your eradication. You'll say, oh, they're on Brian's computer. Clean Brian's computer, reinstall it, do all kinds of good stuff. Now they're on Sally's computer. Okay, let's go clean that one. Oh, they're back on Brian's computer. You know, they're going to move around. So we need to find all of them before we start doing something. To ultimately restore from our systems, we want to wipe the systems completely and restore from backup. That's going to be our best way to do this because that way, if they have some software on there that we don't know about, it still gets cleaned off. And I highly recommend using gold images for your deployments of both servers and workstations so that it's quick and easy and you have a known good state that you're coming back to. In the case of the city with a lot of our ransomware that we had a few years ago, we found that we would re-image the workstations that were infected, and then the file servers we'd restore from our backup solution, and we'd be back to running, and we wouldn't have to pay any ransomware or anything like that. So we got lucky that way. If you can't rebuild the system for whatever reason, you can remove the malicious software and make sure you do some of these other things. One thing I caution though, we had a ransomware event at the city 2 years ago, and we decided to send forensics off to MSISAC just for the fun of it. So I did low-level forensics, real quick, looked through it and found the malware and said, I did it, and we're good to go, but we're practicing. So we send the forensics off and they get it back. They get a report back to us about a month later, and we've already recovered everything in this. We're good to go. I get the report, I'm reading it. Oh yeah, it was that malware. That's what I found. 7 other pieces of malware. I didn't find the 7 other pieces of malware. That I wasn't looking for them. I wasn't paying attention because I didn't care as much. Dropper. Oh, that's how they got. The first application they give you is typically just something that downloads more software. It's innocuous. Most antivirus doesn't find it. So I'm like, okay, that one. The next one, a keylogger. They had all our passwords of anybody who logged into that system. That freaked us out. We got lucky in this incident that the person that was infected said, here's my password so you can fix my system. I'm going to go to lunch. Because they told us their password, it's our policy, we change their password. Someone else knows your password. It's me. I know your password. We got to change your password. So we changed that person's password. But when we found out about the keylogger, we realized all of our system level accounts could have been attacked, the ones that install software and install patches and things like that. So we went through a process to change those passwords, and that was a major endeavor because that's all the systems have those passwords, right? Also in our eradication, we're going to want to put in barriers to stop them from coming back in. So we're going to do some of these things, apply firewall rules, things like that, change DNS names, anything that we can do to make sure that our defenses are stronger and the attackers are not as likely to get in. And then last, in eradication, you want to do some vulnerability scanning. There's a number of tools for that, and highly recommend that you scan your systems before you complete your eradication stage so that you ensure that there are no vulnerabilities left for the attacker to get back in. All right, so we're nearing the home stretch here. We feel like we're ready to recover from this. And the goal of our recovery is to bring things back to business, normal business process. So when we're doing this, you want to think about the fact that you may not have cleaned them all the way off. Your eradication may not have been successful. This is us testing it. So as we bring them into production, bring it back to normal business, we want to monitor heavily. So you might choose a time when it's going to be easier to monitor. And so you can get kind of that baseline of what's normal after the event. So think about those things. The system owners, again, we need to consult with them, or the business owners, we want to consult with them, make sure that they understand when we're coming back into production, that they're comfortable with it, etc. They make the call and we provide advice. That's our jobs. Definitely want to monitor, definitely want to watch our logs, make sure that the attackers are not coming back into the system. This is probably the most important phase for me, lessons learned. After the event, everybody feels like, oh, load is, pressure's off, we're done, we can walk away, we did it, we're successful, and that's great. But probably through the process, there was some heartache, there were some arguments, there were some missed decisions, there was some things that we had to change on the fly. Let's document those things, that the process might not have been perfect. And every time we run an incident, we change the process. We enhance it in some way, something we didn't think of. So we definitely want to do this lessons learned. We want to write a report that has all the information about the process, not the incident. Now we're talking about the process. Hey, Brian started the process and it took 3 days before his boss realized that it was a problem and started actual incident response. You know, that we're not laying blame, we're just saying it took 3 days to initiate that. That's too long. Maybe our desktop team didn't use the right tool and the forensics images got messed up, or they didn't know to use the tool, or they didn't know where to find the tool, etc. So we're just talking about what happened and we're building a report of what's going on. We definitely want to meet as soon as possible afterwards because it's fresh in our brains. Even though we want to walk away and have our vacation and not think about incidents anymore, we want to get that information as soon as possible while it's fresh in people's minds. And then, of course, we want to fix things. If there's anything wrong out there that in the process, we want to fix it, update our plan, maybe communicate to different teams that we hadn't brought into it beforehand, and make sure that they're ready for the next incident. And that's our phases. So, any questions?
I have a question.
All right.
It originally said 7 phases of incident response.
Did it? And how many phases did we have?
And actually, I showed up because I'm thinking, oh my God.
I'm missing a whole phase? Uh-oh. So, let me see. I don't know if I can go back that far that fast. Let me break out.
You're definitely 6.
So...
The course schedule said 7.
Interesting.
Freaked me out. I was like, oh my God.
I apologize for that.
First phase is showing up.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we've got 6 phases and we put 7 on the. Unbelievable. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm English is not my major. That's why I'm a computer geek. So I apologize for that. But these are the phases that we identify. And again, NIST and others have different phases, so that could be a problem. Anyone else have a question? Yes.
You talked about you had a system in place that traces your packets.
Yes.
So how much data, how long do you actually keep?
A lot of
Sounds like
data.
it would take a lot of.
It's a lot of data, so we don't have a lot of time. I can talk to you offline a little bit more when it's not on the recording. But it's a solution that we bought, and it's very versatile and powerful. It's actually a diagnostic tool for the network team. It's not a security tool originally, and they used it to diagnose weird problems. We have a pretty elaborate network at the city, and so that's why they had it. And then we recognized that, wow, that's powerful for us. We're going to use it in our incident, and so it became part of our incident response plan. Yeah. Has this worked for you? Is this useful? Is this something that you can apply? Again, I highly recommend. There's more information in the notes, and when we get to that, because we had an hour and we're about the end of that. So, any other questions? Wow. That either means that this was boring, or that I did it perfectly and it was so obvious, and now you know it all.
Still digest.
All right, still digesting. That's fair. Let me put you on our last slide if I can, just so you can get my information in case you want to contact. I'm in the public sector, so all of you that are in the public sector, I do a similar job as you. So I'm definitely interested in communicating, talking about these things at a deeper level. I'm doing another talk right after this, so I will have to run right after this to the next room. And that one's on the cybersecurity framework. So, but I'm interested in talking about that as well. Thank you, and that's all I have.
Thank you.
All right.